the health definition of health by WHO, physical health is termed as the well-being of the body and proper functioning of all the organs, as well as the absence of disease. Whereas mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with normal stresses of life, and can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make contributions to his or her community. That is quite a mouthful, but that is the WHO definition. The slides are no longer moving. Why is that? Okay, so just to talk about the 5 stages of grief, according to Kubler-Ross, which is the commonest model that we use. The first stage is denial. I mean, that person goes into total denial. No, it's not true. It can't be true. It didn't happen. And then the next stage is anger. That person becomes angry. You are angry at the person who died. You are angry at the person who's brought the news. They are angry about the system. They are angry about just anything. And then the next stage is to start bargaining. Oh, I promise if this person can come back to life, I promise I'm going to be a good person. I promise I'll go to church every day. I promise I'll be this, I'll be that. That's bargaining. And then the next stage is one of depression, when it's beginning to come to reality that actually this person is gone forever. Then the depression begins to set in, and eventually we're able to now accept that actually that person is no longer a part of our lives. Now, the initial reactions to bereavement, initially, there can be a feeling of numbness when we first find out that a loved one has passed away. One may be unable to express one's feelings. Some people find it unable, they are not even able to cry after the death of a friend or a spouse or any loved one. Sometimes we actually think we are responsible for what has happened. So feelings of guilt can be present as well. There's anger, as I mentioned, anger with ourselves, anger with our loved ones, or even with the person who has passed away. We find it difficult to talk to people close to us because we feel that they don't understand what we are passing through. So those are the initial reactions that one would experience in a bereavement. Now, what can be the physical signs of grief that one can see? We could see an increase or decrease in appetite. Some people would comfort eat when they are bereaved. There may be weight loss where there's a decrease in appetite. Of course, there may be lack of energy and fatigue because that person is not eating properly, they're not sleeping properly. There may be inexplainable aches and pains that you can't really explain. There may be a hollow feeling in the stomach. There's an emptiness. There may be tightness of the chest or the throat for no reason. That person may be oversensitive to noise. They don't want noise around them, so they withdraw into a corner. Sometimes they may actually have difficulty in breathing for no reason. The mouth is dry, possibly because they are not drinking enough. And sometimes they find it hard to fall asleep. Some actually are afraid to sleep, thinking that the dead person might come and visit them in the night. So these are some of the physical signs of grief. What about the mental signs? The mental signs would include things like lack of focus and concentration, anxiety over little things, depression, withdrawing into a shell, not wanting to interact with anyone else. Some people may choose not to talk, so they are selectively mute at that particular point. Some people feel unable to cope with the prospect of life without that person who has passed on, especially when it's a spouse. There may be panic or agitation. That person may be unable to do what they would do normally on day-to-day basis. There might be a feeling of guilt, feeling guilty that they have caused the death of that person. That, oh, maybe if I had given that person money, they would have gone to the hospital. Maybe if I had been home, that person would not have died. So there are feelings of guilt, feelings of worthlessness. And there might actually be suicidal thoughts, especially when it's a spouse. So these are some of the mental health signs that we can see when someone is bereaved or is grieving. Now, there are longer term effects of grief on mental health. And this will include things like complicated grief disorder, which is prolonged grief. When the grief continues on and on, maybe somebody has lost their spouse over 2 years ago, and yet they are not able to move on in their daily lives. That is complicated grief. There may be post-traumatic stress disorder. In other words, the bereavement is the trauma, and then there is stress that follows it. And so that person is not able to function properly and mentally. There may be obsessive compulsive disorder. And this is very common amongst women, especially. You find them cleaning the house. The house is already clean, but they keep cleaning and cleaning. They keep tidying the home, keep making the bed, just to keep themselves busy, just to try and stop themselves thinking about their current situation. Some people may take to alcohol or drugs. Now, in addition, if there are any previous pre-existing mental disorders which have been under control before, they may now become worse because that person has now been bereaved. So somebody who has been cured of an eating disorder may actually relapse, or somebody who has personality disorders, or some who have been abusing alcohol or drugs before, and they were healed before, they might regress back into, relapse back into drug or alcohol abuse or even gambling. So these are some of the long-term effects of grief on mental health. The long-term effects of grief on physical health, it can lead to digestive problems because that person is not eating properly as they should. There might be chronic sleep problems because that person's sleep is disturbed. There may be headaches and migraines for no reason at all. There may be poor memory for everyday activities, things that that person was used to doing in the past. They may start forgetting how to do them. They may have sore muscles, like I said before, chest pain for no reason. And then if there are previous medical conditions, they may get worse. For example, hypertension or diabetes, but this would usually be because of lack of self-care. Because they are in a state of grief, they may not remember to take their medication. They may not remember to do what they should do to control their diets in terms of those who are diabetic. So these are some of the long-term effects of grief on physical health. Now, what makes young adults vulnerable? Generally, this is the age when several things are happening at the same time in their lives. They are no longer regarded as children, but at the same time, they are not full-blown adults just yet. Some of them are leaving school, some are going on to uni or college, and some are leaving home for the first time. Some are entering the job market, and some even enter parenthood. So these are a lot of things going on all at the same time in their lives. So bereavement on top of this throws them totally off balance. At this age also, they are very energetic and dynamic, so they indulge in risky behavior. So they may become susceptible to crimes, to accidents, to physical or emotional trauma, or even medical problems. And some of them even experience more serious diseases like sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, because of their risky behavior. Now, there are other things that can contribute to their vulnerability as well. Health-related factors, for example, if they have any physical disability or mental disability of any type, ADHD or autism, if they have any major chronic illness, including cancer or HIV, if they have emotional or psychological problems like depression or self-harming, or if they have learning difficulties, all of these things make them more vulnerable. So if they are now bereaved on top of this, it's a lot more for them to handle. Now, social factors as well can affect their vulnerability in terms of poverty, if they lack food, clothing, shelter, the basic necessities of life, lack of care or love or guidance, psychosocial and emotional guidance from their parents, or if they have been emotionally or physically or sexually abused before, children who are already in trouble with the law, or if they have been sexually exploited or abused, or they have been exposed to crime, to gangs, and to drugs. All of these things, if bereavement now comes on top of this, it complicates things even more. There are also family-related problems that can make them more vulnerable. If, for example, they are caregivers, when I say caregivers, it includes parents as well. If their caregivers are unable to, or unwilling to care for them anymore, so they lose that sense of parental guidance or direction. I mentioned earlier on that some of them are leaving home for the first time at this age. So when that parental control is no longer there, it makes them more vulnerable. If they have parents or caregivers who are alcoholics or drug abusers themselves, that increases their vulnerability. Some of them have parents in prison. Some of them have unemployed or disabled parents, or perhaps their parents are very old and frail, so they are not able to give the amount of care that they need. Or perhaps the parents themselves are emotionally disturbed, or perhaps they are handicapped either physically or mentally, or chronically ill themselves. If their home is overcrowded, maybe there are so many children and there are very few rooms, so they're having to share a lot of things together, or perhaps their parents are either divorced or separated, or they've been brought up by single parents, or if there's an abusive family relationship between the parents. All of these family factors will add to the vulnerability of the young adult. So when you now add bereavement on top of this, it is a lot for their minds to be able to handle. Now, challenges that are peculiar to BAME young adults, apart from all the previously stated vulnerabilities that I just mentioned, the BAME young adults, they are caught between the culture of their ancestors, their parents, and the different society where they are being brought up. For example, someone whose parents have migrated from Nigeria has been brought up in a British society. So there's that conflict between the Nigerian culture and the British culture going on in their minds. They try to belong with their friends, but at the same time, they don't want to lose their original identity. The BAME young adults are more likely to face racism and discrimination. You will agree with me on that one. Their friends may not necessarily understand why they are handling their bereavement and their grief the way they are doing at the moment. But because of their culture, there are certain ways that they will react. So because their friends don't understand them, that may lead to some inappropriate remarks sometimes, or actions from their friends. Because of the fear of stigmatization, some of them may not want to engage with counselors because they don't want to feel different from their friends. Even getting young adults to take medication sometimes for things that they need to take medication for is hard enough because they don't want to look different. So asking them to go and see someone else who their friends are not seeing, they feel stigmatized. So that may stop them also from wanting to engage with bereavement counselors. Now, COVID came as a new challenge. The pandemic and the lockdown brought about a lot of fear worldwide. And this has led to short-term and long-term mental health implications for both young adults and adolescents. The quality and the magnitude of the impact is determined by a lot of vulnerability factors, including the ones I mentioned before. It's also dependent on things like age, educational status, mental health conditions, or being economically disadvantaged, or being in quarantine because of the infection or fear of infection. Now, the BAME groups have disproportionately higher risks of being adversely affected by COVID-19 both in the UK and USA, and I believe that's across the board. The ethnic disparities include the overall number of cases. We have the larger overall number of cases, as well as overall number of critical care admissions and loss of life. I will just show a graph here where you can see that the second line, you can see that the Black ethnic group is more or less the longest. The other at the top is a combination of Hispanics, people from the Far East, from China, Vietnam, and all those other ones, all put together, they have 55. But the next one, right, the next line is the Black ethnic group. So you will see that they are in the vast majority, and the whites and the Asians are about the same. So you can see that there is a disparity in hospital deaths by ethnicity. Now, if we look at male and female proportions, the blue line are the males and the yellow are the females. Again, if you look at the black line, which is the second from the bottom, you will see that the males had the most number, followed by the females, Black males, followed by Black females. And then coming next to them, the Bangladeshi and Pakistani, both male and female as well. So you will see that if you look at these graphs, by and large, the Black and Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups, they had the largest number of COVID deaths. Moving on, what services are available in terms of mental health? It has been identified that there is a pressing need for developing and implementing an evidence-based plan of action that will cater for the psychosocial needs and mental health needs of vulnerable children and adults, not just during this pandemic, as well as going on forwards from here. There's a need to improve the adolescents and young adults' access to mental health and bereavement support services towards healthy coping mechanisms during this current crisis. Now, concerning mental health, for people from the BAME groups, there was already significant mental health inequalities, and this was now increased by the pandemic in several areas. The constraint of quarantine made it impossible for them to be able to access their psychotherapists or their CAMS professionals, because everyone was in lockdown. So they weren't able to access the help that they needed. And so that made things even more difficult for them. Now, in terms of bereavement services, I want us to look at the shortcomings. BAME people, we know, are twice as likely to die as white people of COVID-19. I'm using COVID-19 as an example because that is what is current. Many families were not able to visit their loved ones when they were ill. They had to grieve alone during lockdown. They experienced painful disruptions of funerals and traditional death rites. Ordinarily, if there was no lockdown, there will be different ceremonies that different cultures observe when someone has passed on, but they were not able to do this because of lockdown. People who were able to attend funerals were limited to 6 at one point. So that meant just the close family alone. So issues like this have complicated the grieving process, because for some people, they've not been able to have a closure because they were not able to attend the funeral as they would have liked to. There is a general shortage of bereavement counselors that are specifically trained to deal with adolescents and young adults. Right through before the pandemic and right through the pandemic and even now. You can imagine what the numbers are at the moment. Research has shown that ethnic minority groups were not likely to access mainstream bereavement services. And this may be due to lack of access, as well as the services not being fashioned in a way that will meet the needs of their specific communities. There was also a lack of awareness about bereavement services for ethnic minority communities amongst healthcare professionals themselves. They were limited in their training on bereavement care. They didn't have adequate training, especially around cultural issues. And so even information packs about bereavement were scarce. So these are a lot of the shortcomings that were found in bereavement services. The type and format of the bereavement support and counseling service was also not always suitable for BAME communities. The importance of faith and support provided by family and faith leaders was also not taken into consideration. There's no research that has been carried out outlining the role of family and friends and faith networks. Other than the suggestion that it is there, including the role of faith communities, that it's especially important. The other thing is that terms such as bereavement and grief, they are quite specific to the English language, so they may be difficult to translate into languages that do not have specific words to link with emotions associated with loss or death, because these are English words. So what is the ideal bereavement support for the BAME communities? The way different cultural groups respond to bereavement vary from one another, and this should be taken into consideration. Help, support, and counseling offers should therefore be tailored towards their needs and be culturally sensitive. Other underlying emotional, physical, and financial support offered should also be culturally sensitive. Now, counseling within faith-based settings should be led by accredited counselors of the same faith and the same gender where possible. And faith leaders should recognize that the present generation is different from the older generation. So they should be willing to be flexible whilst not losing sight of their faith beliefs. Just a word of advice that I picked up from one of the quotations, that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities are not likely to access mainstream services, which means that the need for a culturally responsible bereavement service is critical and paramount to supporting the future well-being and mental health. So what should we expect and what should we do? The first thing is that there's no recipe or timeline to follow when it comes to bereavement and grief. Your grieving is yours to own, so take it a day at a time. We need to accept that there's no returning to the life as we used to know it before that person departed. There will always be reminders that your loved one is no longer with you. But importantly, we need to look after ourselves. We need to know that we are not alone. Everyone has suffered one bereavement at one time or the other. We need to find ways to remember our loved ones. Maybe remember their birthdays, remember your wedding anniversary, and just celebrate them in your own little way. When you're ready, reimagine to the world at your own pace. Don't be rushed into reimagine if you're not ready, because it might be counterproductive. And navigate your way into society, into work, and find support for yourself. Connect with others if and when you wish to do so. Share your story, because somebody else might be able to share their story with you, and you might be able to link together and work together with each other. Reminders will always happen. It might be that you're walking past a favorite restaurant where you used to visit with your past, and that might be a reminder which might bring back memories. That is bound to happen. But over time, it gets better and you get used to remembering them with fondness. Let us remember that life changes are normal. It's a normal part of life. Our lives are irrevocably changed because that person is no longer there, but we need to continue to live. Currently available support in the United Kingdom, cruise bereavement care, stops, but the one that is specific for the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups is the BAME Stream Bereavement Support Service. There are other ones, I just listed a few: Childhood Bereavement Network, Compassionate Friends, Grief Encounter, Hope Again, which is part of CRUISE, all the faith, our faith groups, whatever religion we belong to. So this is the support that is currently available, but very few of them are tailored towards the BAME communities, apart from number 2 and our faith groups. So that is what we have available in UK at the moment. These are just a few references. Thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akindele, for the insights you have shared with us. As you were doing your presentation through the screen, I was looking at faces and I could see people nodding. It means you have done a very good job. It means your presentation is direct. You have given answers to the question. On behalf of everybody, I clap for you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I feel more encouraged to continue with this campaign from what I heard from you, from the presentation you have made, especially from the graph that you showed. I can see the disparity. I can see the distance between the BAME community, as they are called right now, and other cultures. So, like I said, I feel more encouraged, and I'm hoping that you will be able to come again when we invite you. I can see someone raising up her hand, and not many people have put questions in the chat box, but I know that a lot of people like to ask direct questions instead of typing. To handle the question and answer session is a key supporter of this campaign, my own spiritual father, Dr. Ikini. Can you come on, please?
Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Right. In the chart, there is none at the moment, but I can see the hand raised. Shola. Is Shola there? Shola Osibanjo? Okay.
Do you want to throw it open, sir?
Yes, there is a question here on what are the long-term effects of bereavement on the young adults or on people generally? That is the question to the presenter, please.
Long-term effects. I believe I had a slide on that, where I talked about long-term physical as well as long-term mental effects. Long-term physical effects will include things like worsening physical conditions that were there before, like I use the example of hypertension and diabetes, because that person is not managing their health very well. There's depression. The person might go into depression because they're just not able to cope with that, especially when it's a spouse that has passed away. They just find themselves not being able to function normally. So they may, if there is an underlying mental health problem before, they may get worse because that person is no longer able to take care of themselves. In terms of physical difficulties as well, you may have digestive problems because that person is either not eating well or is eating the wrong things. So there are so many different long-term effects. There was a slide or two on that. I will Reverend Dosumu has the slide, so he might want to share afterwards.
Okay, thank you. I see some hands raised and some chats are coming up. Let me go to Kingsley. Ojumola, your hand is up. Your question,
Okay.
please.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Akindele, for the presentation. Very well informative. So my question goes thus. You talk about cultural sensitivity. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I want to know, how can one recognize or understand individual cultural behavioral style in order to provide the right support to someone that is bereaved without infringing on their fundamental human rights?
Right. I think I mentioned on one of the slides that as much as possible, if it's possible, to find someone of the same faith and the same culture and the same gender as a counselor, it will help that person. But in a situation where that's not possible, once you know your client, you do your homework. You go and research their culture, so you know how to be culturally sensitive when you're talking to them. And you can always ask them questions. How do people behave when people die in your community? Those sort of questions are quite innocuous. But I would say do your research first. So because you know your client already, do your research on where they come from, what are the cultural norms for burying people. So that will help you in better counseling.
Thank you. Lekan Babalola, your hand is up. Could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Is Lekan there? Okay. There is a question on the chat here. Okay. It says, thank you for a very educating presentation. How about those who are still mourning after 5 years and could not move on? What kind of support is needed for such person, please?
Yes, that I did mention that as well, that is known as complicated grief. And so that needs more specialized counseling. It's bordering already on mental health issues. So you might need to involve mental health practitioners in order to be able to counsel that person very well. That person is not moving on. They're stuck on that point. So they need help to move on. So you might need to involve mental health practitioners in your counseling.
Thank you very much. Yeah, mine is not really a question.
Is that Lekan?
Yeah, speaking.
Okay, all right, go on.
Yeah, I'm actually from Nigeria, and I was invited for this program. Usually, this is my own opinion is more of a practical one, because I know that I experienced this situation along my life. To me, it's not something that anybody will wish to happen to him or her. Right. It's a lot of pressure that has come in. The pressure of being alone, the pressure of starting all over again, the pressure of getting the family of your spouse to get along with you.
Yes.
There are too many, especially when you now have a daughter or you have a child, getting the child out of school. Yes. It's a lot of responsibility, really. And unfortunately, we don't have this kind of opportunity here in Nigeria for people to be counseled, especially when you find yourself with this kind of situation. Most of the time, my own experience was based on just moving on, believing God that is going to guide me through the process. Yes. And it took me a long time to even remarry, because it was like, I don't think I can start again. And I just married recently, about 3 years ago. And I see, just like the presenter said, there's still this reminder that comes.
Yes.
all the time, you still feel like maybe she's still coming back. So it's a lot of pressure, and I'm happy that somebody somewhere is picking up some of these things. It's not easy for people like us to live our life all over again, especially when we have started, and we have started well. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Thank you. Is Shola Osibanjo, the hand is up. Are you there? No? Okay. And Shola Babs, your hand is up. Are you there?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Ask your question, please.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Ma, for the wonderful presentation. My question is just regarding the COVID-19.
Yes.
What advice can you give to a lot of people belongs to BAME group?
Yes.
Who are unwilling or uncertain about receiving a COVID-19 vaccine? Please.
Well, I'm always very frank with people. I will tell them to make a choice. Either make the choice to leave by taking the vaccine, or go and argue with the mortuary attendant afterwards. It's one of two choices. That's my personal opinion. There is no, I mean, this conspiracy theory that is going around is not true. Otherwise, those of us who have had 2 jabs should be monkeys or something else by now, surely. So the conspiracy theory is not true. And it's so unfortunate that those non-vaxxers, they are the ones who are making the pandemic go round and round and round because they keep reinfecting people. Well, fortunately, if you get infected after 2 injections, it's not as serious as those who have not been vaccinated at all. That's the good side of it.
Yeah,
so
very
I
true.
advise those on this platform, if you've not had your 2 vaccines, please, please, and please go for it. I'm waiting for my booster now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful.
All right, Shola Babs, you can put your hand down now. There's a question here. In fact, before the question, this is to the organizer, Tony. He said to get in touch with BAME Stream Bereavement Support. Do you have the link or contact number? So take note of that, please.
Okay, but I think it's one of the organizations listed by.
Yeah, if you Google it, it will come up.
Yeah.
Okay, so right. The next question here, it says, how can one recognize or understand an individual cultural behavior style?
It has been answered. It has been answered, sir.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah,
all right. Okay. Okay, all right. Thank you. The hand that is still up here is Shola Osibanjo. So is it there now? No. Right. I can't see any other hand or any other question in the chat. So can I hand over back to you, Tony?
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. I'm really grateful. I want to say a huge thanks to those of us that have asked questions, and I believe sincerely that all of us have learned either from Dr. Akindele or from the questions that were asked and answered. I believe that in our various communities, we should now be able to support people around us from the knowledge that we have gathered from what we have done this evening. Like I said earlier, expect an exciting evening, and I want to believe that every one of us, we are all excited about the insights that Dr. Akindele have shared with us this evening. Once again, I want to say thank you so very much, Dr. Akindele. Thank you also, Daddy Ikini. There are a lot of people here that I may not be able to mention their names. I can see Kingsley all the way from Canada. Thank you, Lekon Babalola from Nigeria. Please pardon me if I cannot mention names. I can see Mrs. Da Silva from the US, yes. Pardon me if I cannot mention your names. You are all appreciated. And I'm hoping that next month when I send out the invite again, we would all join. Like I said earlier, BAME is what the communities are known for right now. I have been made to understand that there are a lot of discussions on the ground about how to either amend it or change it or give it another name or address it in various forms. Whatever it is, I am going to be in touch with those that are working on it. And by our next meeting, there might be some sort of amendments. But as for now, I want to say thank you all for that very interesting conversation. And on behalf of all participants, I want to thank you again, Dr. Akindele, for sharing your insight on this subject matter. Allow me to say God bless you. We at the Come Let Us Community Project, we should thank you all who are frontline workers at all levels in the NHS. You are doing a very, very good job. You are doing a very, very good job. We are praying for you from time to time, and God will continue to strengthen you. To learn about our activities and how you can volunteer or support us, please visit our website. It is comeletus.co.uk. Our next virtual event will take place in about a month, and we hope you will attend. Until then, we wish you all good health and well-being. Thank you.
Before you sign off, something just came up. Say
Yes,
for
sir.
the next one, please involve the young adults. So it's not just the older ones talking as it affects them too.
Okay, in answer to that, we're actually working with some other organizations. And I don't want to mention names now because we have actually not fixed dates. But I have a feeling that at our next event, we will have some young adults coming on to be part of it. So once again, I want to say thank you all for joining us. For those that I didn't mention their names, please bear with me. It is not my intention, but I can't read all the names here. Thank you once again, Dr. Akindele. Once somebody is saying here, thank you for the wonderful presentation. God bless you. Thanks very much indeed. You may now disconnect.